Welcome back, everyone. So we've got our last panel of the day. So this one features a star lineup of alumni and current students. So you just heard about faculty about the institutional shifts in Latin American and Latinx studies at Vanderbilt. And so what we're hoping is that this panel will give us a sense of how things have changed over time from a student perspective. And in particular, how courses, professors, and degree programs impacted student careers, how the expansion of Latinx student organizations has impacted the campus experience, including international students, as we mentioned earlier, and what community means at Vanderbilt. So I'm very happy to have Rosalinda Mendez with us as moderator for the panel. She is the president of the Vanderbilt Association of Hispanic and Latinx Alumni. And for those of you all who do not know Rosalinda yet, she is very passionate about Vanderbilt, and so is really the ideal person to moderate this panel. She credits her coursework, professors, and the relationships she built with friends here on campus as central to her very successful career and to who she is as a person. So she graduated from Vanderbilt in 1988 with degrees in English and anthropology. After graduation, she worked on archaeological projects in Guatemala, worked at National Geographic, got a master's in Latin American Studies at UT Austin, took a position overseeing Latin American research at the Smithsonian, later moved on to teach at the University of Houston, and today she runs a consulting firm that she founded. In the 1980s, Rosalinda was one of the few Latinx and first-generation students at Vanderbilt, and she describes campus life at Vanderbilt as quite different from what our current students might experience. But in my conversations with her, we've also talked about how there are certain things that haven't changed over time, and I think we've heard that reflected in the previous two panels today. So in addition to looking at how degrees and fellowships offered through the center have impacted our alumni's careers, we're also hoping that this panel can explore how campus life, and again, just going back to this idea of community, how that has changed over time, and what the center's role has been in that, and what student organizations have been in that. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Avery. I'm actually very proud and honored to be with this entire panel. It's incredibly heartening to me because as Avery said, I feel like the old timer here since I graduated in '88, and when I came to Vanderbilt, it was a very different place. So I was basically one of the few Latino students that was here on campus my freshman year. I don't think I met any Latino student other than me that was on campus. And I eventually, because of, again, faculty intervention, was able to meet my people, which was really great. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm gonna let everybody introduce themselves really quickly, and then we'll talk about each of our experiences, so.
Hi, I'm Edilza Sotero. I'm from Brazil, and as Jane talked in her presentation, I was here in an exchange program called CAPS-FIPS. There's a name because there's a big name for all the years, but in the time I was here, the name of the program was Race, Development, and Inequality Project, and I was here as an undergraduate student. It's not a major in Brazil, it's different, but I was an undergraduate student on social science in Brazil, and I came here to take classes and also to develop research that I did here with a lot of help with on the classes I took, and also the library and the books on Brazil, and also in my interests. And I had an interest in education, and I will say that because today I'm a professor of sociology of education, and at the time, my first and initial interest in doing research was really important to make my path on this way. So after I came here, and I will talk more, I think, with the questions that we will answer, but I could go to a master program, and then after to a PhD program, doing research on education and race relations approach, and I was able to get in a position in the Federal University of Bahia when I was as an undergraduate student, and now I'm a professor there. So it was really important to be here for a short period of time in 2006. So I think 20 years next year. And it was really important because it was a time to understand that I was able to do research and to have an academic career for my career as a path.
My name's Estelle Shaya. I graduated in 2023, and I studied Earth and Environmental Sciences and Latin American Studies while I was here. And after I graduated, I worked on the CLACX history project and writing this history. And for the past year, I was in Brazil on a Fulbright, and I'm now working in economic consulting.
My name is Alan Kilgore. I graduated from Vanderbilt in 1994 as a Latin American Studies major. I noticed, I was like, wow, that makes me a senior person here. Like I'm an older person here. But it's also like, it also strikes me like that's when it's like people just got a Latin American Studies major. Now everyone apparently has to like have other majors as well. I'm like, well, they've done a lot of stuff here. But I'll speak on the panel to sort of, how I came into this, what it was like. What was the Latin American Studies program like from 1990 to 94, at least my understanding of it, and then the path that I took, which has been nonlinear, but fascinating and great, and always impacted by what I did here at Vanderbilt. So I'll speak to that as we get into it.
I'm Shelza Rivas, and I am class of 2012. I'm a triple door, so I never left, and I'm still here now with my profession. So Latin American Studies and psychology, and then I moved on to the nursing school, and I did the accelerated nursing program, and I'm a women's health and adult primary care nurse practitioner. And then I went on to get my doctorate in nursing practice. And right now, I'm assistant professor at the nursing school. I'm also director of global partnerships, and I do have a clinic day that I do in there, try to at least, because patient care is at the core of my being as well as a core of what I do as a nurse. But my time here at Vanderbilt, we were the first class to go through the Commons, which seems like at the time it was like the thing. It's what made us like really, and now it's like, okay, cool. So it was just kind of like it's been so long, but it was the classes that I took and the research, the really just kind of brief pathway into research that kind of led me to, it validated my path into nursing, into healthcare, through my experience with different classes, different professors, different students. So I'm happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Gabriela Newell. I also go by Gabby. I was a Spanish and Portuguese major here, as well as an economics major, class of 2016. I worked for 3 years with investors working to invest in emerging markets, and then I pursued a degree in city planning at the University of Pennsylvania. Since then, I've worked as a city planner, and now I'm an infrastructure economist, and I've had the opportunity to conduct stakeholder engagement meetings in Spanish, Portuguese, and English, and then also currently work on infrastructure projects in the Americas. So some of my main projects are in Colombia right now.
Hello, my name is Adrian Quintana. I'm a current senior here at Vanderbilt University studying neuroscience and Latino studies. Following graduation, I plan on doing neuroscience research for a few years with the hopes of pursuing a MD PhD in the future. During my time here at Vanderbilt, I've been part of numerous Latinx organizations, including the Association of Latin American Students, the Mexican American Student Association, Alpha Psi Lambda, and among others. And so I'm excited to be able to share my insight of what life is for Latinx studies here at Vanderbilt today.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. I think we're going to have a great, lively discussion. And listening to you, describe, when we get to the end, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be like this giant trajectory upwards. So considering where every trajectory lately has been down, it's going to be nice to go up. So when I got here in 1988, like I said, there weren't a lot of Latino students here. And I basically got here thinking, okay, I'm from Texas originally, and I learned very early in my life that you just keep your head down and you do your work and you just don't bring attention to yourself. So that's exactly what I did when I came to Vanderbilt. I was the first one to go away to college from my family. I was far, far away from home. My parents were freaked out because I was a girl and I was alone and I was in a different state. And all of that was weighing on my mind. I did what I did when I was in high school, because of course, even back then, even though people say, oh, I wouldn't have gotten into Vanderbilt now, but even back then, you had to be somewhat good to get into Vanderbilt. So I was very active in different clubs and things in high school, and so I joined the drama club, the VUT, because I was in the drama club. And one day we were just having a regular drama club meeting, and these 4 older professors came in who I'd never seen before in my life, and they were like, who's in charge? And they're like, so like the president said, oh, I'm in charge, we're having our meeting, can we help you? And they're like, does anyone here speak Spanish? And no one looked at me, but I said, yeah, I do. And they're like, okay, you're gonna be in the Spanish play. Because we want a professional person to be in the Spanish play. And I'm like, I'm a freshman. And so that person was Dr. Crispin, and he was there with Francine Berquist and Dr. Pupo Walker, and there was one other person, I can't remember who it was, but they were like, you're gonna be in the Spanish play, and it's gonna be great, so I started going to a Spanish rehearsal, and I met these professors. And the thing that was amazing to me was they took this incredible interest in who I was, not just because I was, filling a gap in their Spanish play. So I was an anthropology English major. I took all the classes in all those disciplines, and throughout my 4 years, there was a few professors in those disciplines that were very instrumental to me, but the majority of them didn't know who I was, or I was just a student to them. To these people, I became someone they looked out for. They saw me. Francine, when I was in Berquist, when I was in Peabody for the second year, because sophomores lived on Peabody back then, she said, you don't need to live there. You need to come live in McTier. And I was like, why do I need to live in McTier? Well, you need to live in McTier, you'll see. And so I moved to McTier. She worked it out and did all this work for me, got me there, and all of a sudden it was like, there are all these people here who look like me. They speak the same language I do. We eat the same food. We're having all this fun. We had this thing where they required you to have a fun study break once a month, and it was called International Disco. And so every hall had to do the disco thing. So on that day, we would stay up till 4 and 5 in the morning learning bachatas and merengues and the whole thing, and the dorm loved it. We had the best party. The Germans had a lot of beer, but it was not the best party. The Latinos had the best party. It was great. But the thing that happened was we would have these days, and you were required to eat dinner there. It was like you signed a contract, and if you didn't show up, then you could get kicked out. And so everybody was good. They all showed up because the food was better. And they also were allowed to serve alcohol then. And so so it was great. It was a much wanted place back then. It didn't have mold. Maybe they had mold, but I don't know. But the thing that was interesting about that was that we all had this time. So there were Puerto Ricans on that hall. There were Colombians. There was someone from Spain. There were people from all over Latin America, Mexicans. And we all got together, and we all celebrated our culture. And then we all walked out the door and then became like everybody else at Vanderbilt. And the thing that was I was telling someone, so last week, I'm now president of VALA. I came because we helped to support the Ballet Folklorico, and we've been trying to help with ALAS for the tenure of my presidency, because I think it's very important that we have a pipeline so that students see there's something past being here at Vanderbilt and their student groups, that there is an alumni association, and there is a community past what their 4 years here is. And I wanted to cry because I was sitting there watching all these people joyfully, like laughing and dancing. And they were very kind because I'm doing this photography class, and they let me come before, and I was taking pictures of them getting dressed and having fun and doing all these things. And it was a community where they were outside their dorm. They were in Vanderbilt. They were of Vanderbilt. And this was important. And last year I came to Café con Leche. It was the same thing. It was amazing. It was like these students were so like proud of their culture. They didn't have to hide it. They didn't have to like pretend they were something they weren't. And I hope to God that's not going to happen again. But I don't think it will, because what I saw from those students was this intentionality of saying, I'm here, I belong here, and this is my school. So I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I was getting all emotional again. Anyway, but this is the important thing. But again, like as Avery said, I think students, and like you were speaking of earlier with these kind of circles and things like that, when you have this, like, when we have faculty that like, fosters this relationship and community and gives you a safe space, it gives you a place where you can grow. Like, I know that, and sometimes I know I'm not tooting my own horn, but sometimes when people talk about all the things that I've done and they're like, wow, that's super impressive. And I literally know that I would not be the person I was or I am if I'd not been at Vanderbilt. For all warts and all, things that are bad, things that change, Vanderbilt gave me a sense of self. It gave me a sense of determination. I had people that were always telling me I could be something, as opposed to I just had to kind of go forward and accept what was given to me. It's kind of hokey, but yes, it dared me to grow in some ways, to be a better person and to be proud of who I am. And that's why I'm really happy. And I was telling someone that on Monday I went to the VUNU session for accepted students in Houston, and I was able to go and speak to a lot of parents who were scared, who were not scared, concerned about what their child's experience was going to be coming to Vanderbilt. And having seen what I saw the week before, I was like, it doesn't matter what the administration says on one level. It doesn't matter that, because the community is here. And I don't think the community is just going to roll over. And unfortunately, Salwa is not here today because she's ill, but there are other people like Salwa. They are very proud of who they are. They want to be very engaging with folks. They have a lot of kids that are interested in celebrating their community. And I told each one of those parents, it's going to be okay. Your kid is going to find their way. And I was even speaking to one kid who was she was African American and Asian, and she was like, and she's in Texas, so she's like, I don't fit in anywhere. And I was like, and I forgot to mention my daughter also graduated from Vanderbilt in 2021. And that was actually a funny experience. I was moving her in the Commons, and someone came and they were talking, and I said, oh yeah, well I went here, and they were like, that's so great, your daughter's going to the same school you went to. And I was like, she's going to the same physical space I went to. I was looking in our hall, and there were people of all these different colors, and I was like, where did this come from? I literally was taken aback, because I'd only come back to reunion. And so I really hadn't seen the full transformation. And I know when you're saying, 12%, 18%, 10%, I mean, it seemed like a big fat zero when I was here. So that was kind of my experience, and a little bit of, sharing what I've seen through my daughter's experience, and also being president of VALA and seeing what the kids are doing now. So I'm looking forward to your speech down at the end. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think most of that in my mind today is that I had a community when I was here at Vanderbilt, and think about numbers. I remember at the time in beginning of the century, the number that is in my head, that was 2% of Latino students at Vanderbilt. And I had the impression that I met everyone. It's because now, looking at that moment of my life, I know how it's hard to build a community. And I want to thank two persons that are here, Marshall and Jane, because they were so involved with us when we were here. And I'm saying we because we are three Brazilians, three girls from Brazil. And now I'm really engaged with students from Brazil coming to United States. I'm working with that. It's something that I'm trying to do to make changes in trajectories, in paths of students in Brazil. And I know how it's hard to make that happen. Like 3 girls from Brazil will come to Vanderbilt and make place to them, to make time to them, to the research. When I was here, like I said, I was interested in education. And I went to take a class as Black Shoes in Education. I don't remember the name of the professor. I think he's a professor here at Vanderbilt yet. And I was not responsible for that. I didn't have no idea how to take classes and how to look for professors. So someone said, "Oh, she wants to research on education, and she wants to do a comparative studies on affirmative action in Brazil and to try to understand that in the United States. So go to that class." And go to the other class about race, gender class. So that time that Jane, Marshall, and I have to say Norma and Chilion, and before I came here, I was talking with Rebecca. She was one of the colleagues that came with me, and Ana Luisa, she was here at Fisk, but also from Brazil. So we were together a lot. And I said, I'll go to Vanderbilt. And they were like, wow. And say hi to Jane, say hi to Marshall and to Norma, because they had a huge impact in our lives. And so to be in this community, also in McTeer, and now you're talking about like what was like in the Latino hall, and I and my friends, we were in the international hall. It's the problem to be Brazilian. It's an island in the middle of Latin America, so we didn't speak Spanish, and we need to learn English. And the international hall had all these people from different places in the world, but the language were English, so we would stay there, but inside the house, it was impactful experience. When you said about café com leite, for example, I was here for a semester, and I had time to play at café com leite. At the year, I made a big friend, a wonderful friend. Her name was Erica Delgado, and she was the director of a play on Columbia rhythms, and I was like a dancer with other people from McTeer. And to have this experience, I had no idea how to connect with people so near in Latin America to Brazil, but I had no prior experience to talk with people in Spanish, to know more about Latin America. It was here at Vanderbilt that it was possible. And just to talk about career and how to be here, even for a semester, was so important. I would say it was important for, I think, accelerate my career. I was here in 2006, and I had to 1 year more in my undergrad course. So I went back to Brazil, and it's a long story, but I finished my undergrad in this year, And in this year, I got into a master program at USP, a Universidade de São Paulo. That is the most prestigious university in Brazil. And I know that I didn't have a chance to get at USP without come to Vanderbilt to learn English. So this skill to know English, to do my exam, and to be able to pass my exam was really important. But also, here I understood that I could be a researcher, a professor, and understand that not only I was able to be, but I want to be. And it was here that it was made possible. So even though it's a short period of time, I can talk about myself, for myself, but also I can talk for a lot of people that came here. And for these 20 years, I thought some of them came back to the United States to do a master's degree here, a PhD program here. Some of them stayed in Brazil, but have the knowledge of the importance of this experience. And when I received the invitation to be here, I said, yes, I have to go there. And when I arrived here, and through everything that I heard today, I know that to be here is also to put this word and how important is the work that this center do for a long time, and the impact of in many trajectories, in many lives, that my life is one of them. Thank you.
So when I first decided to come to Vanderbilt, a major in Latin American studies, any association with the center was not at the forefront of my mind. I think I visited here in high school back in 2018, and at that time, I think I'd had just about no exposure whatsoever to Latin America. I knew some Spanish, but most of my international experiences were much more focused kind of on Europe or the Middle East. And so that was not at the forefront of my mind at all. And then I took a gap year before I started at Vanderbilt, and I lived in Brazil for a year, and I did an exchange year there. There was not that much thought in deciding on Brazil as the place to go. I was like a burnt out of high school 18-year-old, and just decided to go to Brazil. And that experience was really eye-opening to me. It introduced me to a part of the world that I'd really learned nothing about kind of in high school and before, and that I really had no exposure to. And so when I came to Vanderbilt, I'd just come back from this year in Brazil. I spoke some Portuguese. It wasn't perfect. The grammar was not great. And I really wanted to continue learning. It was a very hard year for me and a weird year in many ways. And I saw a lot of things that I didn't really understand. I was there during Bolsonaro's election. I was there in this very kind of specific political moment, a social moment, and I had no context to understand that year whatsoever because I'd gone in with no Brazilian history, no knowledge of Portuguese, no anything. And so when I came to Vanderbilt, part of me really wanted to understand that. And, I didn't come into the center thinking I was originally going to do a Latin American studies major. I came in thinking, I'm going to keep learning Portuguese and maybe try and understand this experience a little bit. And very quickly, I fell in love with all of the classes. I fell in love with the language learning and every part of it, and decided to make a major out of it. But a lot of my experience with the center was, in part about understanding those experiences, in part just broadening my understanding of the world, exposure to something that I really hadn't known much about. I think my experience at Vanderbilt
overall was, very internationalizing in many ways. Even though I'd had some international experiences before I came and, had obviously lived in Brazil for a short amount of time, it still was, really, really an opportunity to expand my mindset and understand so many other parts of the world. On the kind of, student life and cultural front too, I think, there were so many, at my time at Vanderbilt, there were so many different student associations and organizations and so many ways to get involved with so many affinity groups, even if you weren't necessarily of that identity. And so, I found things that supported my own identities, and then, also was able to, for example, dance in Café con Leche as well. That was great. I did that a couple years. And there, I think another Brazilian student association was created while I was at Vanderbilt, and I went to several events with that. There were, Portuguese conversation hours, bate-papo, that were held weekly, and getting involved with those things. So, the classroom was a really expansive experience for me too, but also just all of the people I was meeting and all of the different opportunities for students to be involved with things, and cultural showcases, and everything else. And I really felt like the culture of it was everyone just wanted to share all of their experiences and bring you into as many things as possible and let you partake of everything that you were interested in. And I loved that about my time.
Thank you.
It's great. So I'm glad you said some of that, because even, and so I was here from 1990 to 1994, and Vanderbilt was what I believe to be a dramatically different place than it is today, right? And Latin American Studies, which is my major, was probably lacked the formality of what CLACX is today, and the resources and everything. So I come to this from a very different background, but I do want to share a little bit about what I think some of the commonalities are and some of the hidden gems of it all. And I also when I came to Vanderbilt, I came at a time where there weren't many, I think, Latino students, right? I mean, from 1994, there just weren't. I mean, to give some perspective, I mean, so I'm from Birmingham, Alabama.
Your mic.
Oh, is that on? Oh, it's mine. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I hadn't said anything important yet anyway. But when I came to Vanderbilt, it was very, very, very different than it is today. And a little bit of a blessing today, right? Because when I said I'm from Birmingham, Alabama, when I came to Vanderbilt, there were 12 students that freshman year. They came from my high school. And relatively speaking, it was a pretty vanilla group, look back on it, and my wife always reminds me, how'd y'all get into Vanderbilt? But I will tell you, and when I first came, I can't remember what they called it at the time, but you had to take some core classes. You had to, whatever the core. Yeah, or was it Axel? I don't remember what it was called, but but you had to take some history. You had to have so many history credits, and you could take world history or U.S. history. I was like, that was so high school, right? I was like, I'm taking Latin American history. That's very college of me, and I don't remember what it was, like 160A or whatever it was, the Intro to Latin American History, and Marshall was my professor, and off we went. And that really changed my life. And so I took my first semester. I was like, I should take 160B. I should take this. I should take the second semester of this. And that's really just how I got into this great thing. And I'll tell you a little bit about sort of where that's all led to me, and I think some of the commonalities. But as I've heard everyone, and listen, all of this has changed my life tremendously. I'll speak briefly to that. But one of the things I think that's special about this is people that are part of this program. It's a passion. It's something that just the common thread is times are different, everything's, but like everyone here in this room has some sort of pull that brings them here, that brings them here today. That there's this common thread. It's like, this is what I like. This is where my people are. This is what I want to do, right? And so And that thread will take us wherever this pathway leads us, right? You know, sometimes you get more funding, sometimes less funding, sometimes it's, you know, whatever it is, the thread will still be there. And that's, I think, a positive thing. I will fast forward my own sort of experience. When I finished, I moved to Guatemala to work with an organization that was, you know, really a nonprofit organization in northern Guatemala, and I did that. And then I did what I thought I was going to do anyway, which is go back to law school. And I did, and I became a lawyer. But I've always stayed in touch with sort of those involved with Latin America. And then more recently, maybe 6 years ago, I left practicing. I was working for GE, and so I spent time in Brazil on projects. I spent time in different parts of Mexico, always touching base. But then an opportunity came available to go work for a construction company, and they're like, "We don't need you as a lawyer, but can you take on a business role and will you move out of the country?" I was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And so they won a project in Guatemala to build the U.S. Embassy in Guatemala, and said, "I'll do that." And so my family and I moved to Guatemala, and we were there for 3 years, and it was just a fabulous experience. So one other thing I want to speak about too is a little bit of what we heard on the last panel, right? I'm removed from the world of academics and CLACX and how it's funded, and there's a greater formality to it, and all this sort of stuff goes on. You know, I'm sure it is being recorded, as a matter of fact, but like what I say here, so it is what it is, but like we live in a total chaotic world right now, and it's upsetting, right? Very upsetting, but I hear the worry like from students, like, what am I gonna do? Or from faculty and people involved in this, how are we gonna, but what I know from my takeaway from this is one thing that will persist is that thread and the sort of the passion for what you do, but also the people that you engage with. And so, you know, I still very much look at Marshall. We'll talk to Marshall as a mentor. Wendy Hunter, who is a political science professor here, I had coffee with her in Austin like 6 months ago, and we just spent hours together just talking. Some of my closest friends from Vanderbilt were, you know, engaged in the Latin American Studies program or did ASB and on some sort of Latin American program, and they're still close friends, and we're still engaged. And that is, you can't remove the fact that the people that you will meet, the people that you will engage with, will persist through whatever chaos we're currently in. And that's valuable. It's very valuable. The fact that I'm the 1994 grad here and came up from Birmingham today to be here, that should tell you something as well. How important this program was to me is so, so valuable. And so I'm happy to be here today.
So again, I'm Shelza, and I am originally from Peru. I was born in Lima, and we were one of the first families to come into Tennessee in 1995. My dad was a horse trainer. He's a horse trainer, but he was a more active horse trainer. And we set up home in Thompson Station, Tennessee. And we were just two Peruvian families at the time. And as any first-gen grad that will tell you, you have two homes. You have your home at home where you speak Spanish, eat all the food and whatever. Then you leave your door, you leave, and then you are the American you try to be at least, at school with your friends and whatnot. And so very much, this was 1995, so very, very few Latino students, even in elementary school, all of that stuff. And so from very early on, I think I learned that separation, and the thought of like going to college and whatnot came very late to me as far as in high school, but I ended up graduating from Brentwood High School, which if you're familiar with Middle Tennessee, it's a very affluent area, also still till this day, not very diverse. And so I was one of two Latin students that graduated in my class of 300. And so I considered myself very, very white, like I very, very, very much so, and then at home it was different. And so when I came to Vanderbilt, when my peers actually found out that I got accepted to Vanderbilt, they were like, oh, that was an affirmative action, probably acceptance, you know? And so that kind of set the tone, unfortunately set the tone for my initial experience at Vanderbilt to be like, oh, I was not accepted here for my academics or for whatever. I was just diversity, acceptance, unfortunately. Come to find out there was someone on the waiting list that apparently thought I took her spot or something. Anyway, all the drama aside, I'm here. But because I had grown up in that separation, when I came here, and at that point, it was 2008, there were a lot more Latino students, and a lot of them were coming from New York, California, and Miami, who are just, when I was interacting with them, were just in their body, like, I'm Latina, I'm Latino, like, I'm here, whatever. And I didn't have that because I had to shut it off when I was at school, and I could turn it on to some degree when I was at home. And so for me, that community was actually really intimidating because I wasn't that type of Latino. I wasn't that type because I didn't grow up like that around. It was just literally me and my family, and then maybe a few people there. And then the other Latino in my high school pretended he wasn't, like, I don't speak Spanish, I don't. So during a time when Vanderbilt kind of came in, I was very, very just taken aback by how my peers who looked like me, and like, we essentially came from the same background, really embraced it, really and it's really scared me because it was expected of me. And they realized that I was a little more timid. I wasn't the outgoing one and whatnot. And so Latin American Studies came my way because I was like, well, I'll start taking easy classes because I know Spanish. And that was, and it was a wonderful introduction to the Spanish language, but also literature. And that's where I really kind of found my sweet spots, just kind of learning initially about the literature, about being able to read awesome poetry, about, kind of learning that aspect and really honing in on not just speaking conversational Spanish, but actually being able to do the grammar part, all that, being able to write appropriately. And then I started to take the history classes. I took the Incan Empire. I took medical anthropology is another one, but that was a really great one. I took Central America, like all these things, and it just kind of was the beginnings of reconnecting to those Latin roots that I really disconnected from a long time ago. That I think was a survival mode for me and my family, to be quite honest. And it wasn't until I took Latino immigration experience with Professor Lesagasi Segovia that I know retired several years ago, but she was the one, and she introduced me the concept of la vida en la rayita. So I was Peruvian American, and oftentimes I lived on this little line, tiny little line that just kind of like bebopped like a seesaw, and I had to kind of tip this way and tip that way depending on where I was. And my mind was just blown. I was like, oh, that is it, that's my life. And I remember just like going home and be like, Mom, you will not have it. And she's like, okay, cool. And I said, oh, you don't understand. And I was 18, I was like 19, 20 at that point. But then that kind of like, as far as like identity, I really was able to find that kind of like landing base, that core, knowing that no soy ni de aquí ni de allá, but I'm like in the middle, and what does that look like? And so I didn't partake too much in all the wonderful activities that Café Con Leche, all that. I was always on the periphery of that, just because I was still trying to kind of find my way in. But I had support from awesome professors. And when I got into, I think like a lot of people, you start off as pre-med, and then you realize it's really hard. But I went into pre-nursing along with, so I did psychology and all that. And I knew that part of my desire to like look at this profession, like what was I going to do with this degree? I felt like marrying Latin American studies and psychology in healthcare, whatever that looked like, was going to be a really awesome intersection where I could take my personal experience and really potentially guide not only people from my community, but potentially others after me. And so women's health, that's my gynecology, that's my passion, that's my role. And in our culture, it's very hush-hush. Well, I think it's getting better, but I think we're getting there. So I was like, I want to do something in that. And I got into nursing school. Again, in nursing school, I was one of maybe 5 Latinx students at that point. It was 2012. And then also got very nurtured there. And it was interesting because of all the qualities that maybe were negative or like that made me different and not the most positive light, like the color of my skin, my background, my name, all those things, those were really celebrated here, and really celebrated at the nursing school. And I didn't really know what to do with that. It was like, don't look at me, like I'm not that special. It was like a lot of like, please don't shine the light, but it was that really great sort of like bumping into that. And so at the nursing school, I finished in 2015, got my doctorate in 2017. And then when I started teaching in 2017, they were like, we need to have a Hispanic Latinx student nurses group. I was like, you don't have one? I was like, you're right. When I was here, you didn't have one. They're like, well, because we didn't have enough, and now we have enough. So I became the first faculty advisor for that group, and now we have a really good, robust group of students. And now I think I see my role of where I am in a mentorship capacity. I do global things, I see patients and whatnot, but I think moving on, knowing that a lot of people look like me in the undergraduate space now at Vanderbilt, we haven't filtered that out too much into the graduate schools. And so in nursing, my role is to be that presence. Right now, our faculty members, there's only 3 Latinx faculty members in our school. And so to be able to, for prospective students, we just had admitted students say a few weeks ago, and they're like, oh, hi. And then so they kind of come up, it's kind of like a good, it's just really nice to be able to really, be an example for those that got through undergrad, first of all, which is a huge feat, and now are pursuing graduate school. It's a big deal for our families. It's a big expectation. It's a big, it's a celebration. It's all of that. And so to be able to be there and be like, I did it, you can do it. And you're needed in healthcare, especially right now. It's like you said, the world is chaos. And I've seen it in my practice quite a bit. And so we need, I'm always like, we need people that look like you, that sound like you, that have your background. And so that has been probably the biggest thing, is that the CLACX and just being here allowed me to reconnect to that part of myself that I had to press down. And I'm still working on it. But it really kind of led me to this trajectory. And so my 2 other brothers are also Vanderbilt graduates, so we're really, really a big Vanderbilt family. That just tells you how much we love it here. And so I plan to stay here for as long as they will have me, because I think I'm giving back in that way that they nurtured me. So I just feel like I don't want to leave. A lot of my people, when I say my people, might be want to leave. They want to leave the South and whatnot. I'm like, I want to stay, because if who's going to stay? Who's going to stay? Who's going to be here to still be a presence? And so that's kind of why I'm here until I'm in my walker and until I have to take that elevator, all that stuff. So, but yeah, that's my story.
I'm going to come from this at a different lens. I genuinely just wanted to start speaking Portuguese because I liked Brazil. I was lucky enough to grow up in a bilingual household. My mom's from Paraguay. My dad's studied Latin American studies at Vanderbilt as well, so he speaks Spanish and Portuguese. And so I always had that exposure, but I'd never been in the sort of circumstance where I had to learn a language from scratch. And during my time at Vanderbilt, I kind of reflected on, why do I have so many genuine, great friends and relationships from this department? And it's just from the vulnerability of having to learn a new language. I mean, not being afraid to make mistakes, but then also this sort of aspect that you don't have any of your other classes, where you're actually turning to your partner, turning to the person sitting to your side and just saying, how are you? What did you do last weekend? What's your favorite food? And you learn so much about another person. And I think that's what's so incredible about the department, and then just really kind of makes you have this affinity towards the department. And so I was also, when I first started at Vanderbilt, affiliated with the math department and the economics department, and really great experiences, but very different experiences. I went to those events for the free food. These events I went for the people, and also free food. So. And then, just also how integrated the department is, as a freshman, having access to grad students in your class and being able to envision these different futures for yourself and having conversations with these students. Okay, this is a possibility for me. This is a possibility for me. Alma was in some of my classes too, so I got to know her. And I still didn't know what I wanted to do when I graduated, but it gave me an idea of what my possibilities were, and I think that was really exciting. And then also, like was mentioned earlier, the Bachipapos, I remember we would just go to SATCO on a Friday, and it was from freshmen to grad school students, and just kind of sitting and speaking about frivolous things. And I think it's amazing to speak about nothing really that important, but in a different language, and really forming that bond and being able to connect with people on that level. So that's what was really special to me about this department. I genuinely had the best time in all of my classes. And so while I wasn't certain whether I was going to pursue this professionally, I had the time of my life. And then also just being forced to be out of my comfort zone and learning a new language. I did the FLAS fellowship over the summer. I did the summer in Brazil. And I remember my first day there, I did not open my mouth once. I was so scared to speak. I was like, I thought I was good at Portuguese, but now that I'm here in this massive city, I don't think I know Portuguese at all. But obviously, eventually, I needed to communicate with people. And so it was really nice to grow that confidence over time. And I really was so impressed with just over the 6 weeks, impressed with myself and how much I was able to improve. And I came back feeling fluent and passed the test, and I was told I was fluent, so that was great. And then, so just overall, the experience was amazing. And then, there was such a focus on STEM too while I was here, so I pursued, while economics isn't STEM, I was initially mathematics and then switched to economics, and I did really enjoy economics. I loved it, the way it made me think. But when going into the job market, I thought, this is what's going to get me jobs. It's not going to be my other major. I just, did that major because I really wanted to learn Portuguese. However, every job that I've gotten has been because I speak Spanish and Portuguese, so don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And I've had the opportunity to work in different markets in, Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, projects in Mexico. So yes, pursue what you love. Don't let anybody tell you to do anything else just because they think that's what is popular or what's needed. So that's my experience.
Yeah, so I guess before I begin, I'll give a little bit of background information of where I'm from. So I grew up in a really small town in southeast New Mexico. The population is like 70% Hispanic. So before I came to Vanderbilt, I kind of really never had like fears of showing my culture because I was surrounded by it completely. So whenever I made the decision that I would end up coming to Vanderbilt, I think that was one of the first things that worried me the most. I was going to go from being in a place where I was where I was completely okay with my culture to maybe somewhere where there wasn't going to be people who were like me. But I think when I arrived here, that what I realized was that it was going to be like completely the opposite. So my freshman year roommate was actually born and raised in Puerto Rico. Down the hall from my room, one of my best friends, who I'm still really good friends with now, was from Texas and also was Mexican American. And then Celso was also my faculty head of house my freshman year. So to me, I kind of realized the realization that like, oh wait, maybe this actually, it's not going to be so bad. So I started realizing that there was actually a big diversity within my class freshman year. And I started making a lot of friends who were from many different areas of Latin America. And so from there, we kind of like, from making these friendships, I kind of was how I first started getting involved with cultural organizations at Vanderbilt. So I think my class had a very special circumstance because we came in right after COVID. So although there was a high presence of these cultural orgs on campus, I feel like they were all a bit static just because everybody had just come back from being online. So I think that year, my freshman class was kind of the ones who had to step in and kind of bring in this motivations to get them started again. So for my friend group, that kind of started with ALAS, as it was like the biggest, the like umbrella organization for Latinx students on campus. So a bunch of my friends joined the executive committee for ALAS, and they began planning events and kind of exposing our culture to campus, but also kind of making it creating a safe space for Latinx students on campus. So in meetings, we talked a lot about advocacy and kind of being proud of our identity and not being afraid to showcase our identity. And so this is kind of where I first became motivated to not only embrace my identity, but also to have this motivation to bring it to every place I went on campus. So I remember my first Café con Leche and being surprised of how many Latinx students attended, but also many students from many other diverse cultures, and how we were able to, how beautiful it was to be able to expose your culture in that way. So my sophomore year, I actually began to become involved with executive committees for these cultural organizations. So I joined the Mexican American Student Association as the treasurer. So for the first time, I've kind of saw firsthand what it meant and what the process was of planning events and exposing culture on campus. And I was able to meet a lot of my closest friends through these committees and organizations. And actually, one day we were sitting down and we were discussing Greek life. And Greek life is still one of those places on campus that's not really completely diversified, I would say. And so we were having this long discussion about that. And one of my other best friends kind of looked at each other and we were like, what if we bring a Latinx identity Greek organizations to campus? And although it kind of started from this simple conversation, we kind of worked hard towards it, and we ended up founding one of the first co-ed Latinx identifying Greek organization on campus, which is still active to this day. Although I'm a senior, and so I kind of stepped away from that organization, it's still active. They actually just inducted new members a few days ago. So yeah, that's kind of the story on how it kind of was for me to come into campus and be comfortable to expose my culture and like find a group of people that also had those same motivations. So junior year was when we first started the Ballet Folklorico organization. It kind of stemmed away from Café con Leche because Ballet Folklorico was always one of the dances that we did for Café con Leche. However, we kind of started to realize that a lot of people were really interested in Ballet Folklorico. And so Sawa and a few of my other friends decided that it would be a good idea to separate the organization from ALAS and kind of start this new little dance group that could perform outside of Café con Leche. And I think one of the things that I'm most grateful for during my time here at Vanderbilt is the amount of resources that are available for students. So making an organization can seem hard, but it was actually very simple to do. We reached out to departments such as CLACX and kind of asked for guidance. And within a year, we received, although a little bit of funding, we did receive funding to put on a few like small guest showcases or guest events that year. But this year, kind of the main group that started the organization, we were all seniors this year. And so our biggest dream, I guess, was to be able to host our first showcase that would be primarily about Ballet Folklorico. So over the past year, we've kind of been working towards this event and worked hard to plan it. We got various sponsorships throughout campus, and for the first time, we were able to put on this really beautiful showcase where we were able to bring dances from various different regions of Mexico. Interestingly enough, actually, a few of the dresses that we had for the dance of Veracruz were handmade by one of the students here at Vanderbilt. So yeah, I think now here at Vanderbilt, there's really a lot of opportunities out there for you to be able to really showcase your culture and not feel like you have to kind of hide it. I think I've made a lot of my closest friends here through cultural organizations, and I will forever be thankful that I was able to have this experience where I really didn't have to hide from my culture, but instead probably experience it at an even more beautiful level than I did at home. But yeah.
So yeah, and he's also leaving out that they actually had musical pieces, which were amazing by Hispanic composers. And it was really beautiful to watch that part of it too. So it just wasn't the dance, it was the whole thing. And it was a very diverse audience that was there. It wasn't just a bunch of Latinos that were watching you, obviously were parents, but a lot of your friends came, which was great. And that was, to me, that was really I mean, it's like cafe, right? That where, people, in your hall, you bring them, because that's what happened with my daughter. She ended up getting dragged along to help with that when she was here. But I think to go from me, like, and, kind of hiding who I was, and for good reason. One tiny little story was really funny. I was telling someone here earlier that there was a guy that I used to see when I was a freshman. We lived here, but not here, because this was Kassam. It was prison dorms. But anyway, so when I was here, there was a guy who lived in a basement, and I used to see him all the time. And I'd see him out at frat parties, at football games, and we knew each other. And for my 25th reunion, he's now a circuit judge in West Virginia, and he's a dignified man, but he'd had a few that day at the class party. And so I walk up, and he's like, "Oh my God, Rosalinda," and he like puts his arms out, and I was like, "Sean," and he like twirls me around, and he puts me down, and he's looking at, and most people look down at me because I'm short. And so I was like, he was looking at me, and he looked a little quizzical for a minute, and he went, "Oh my God, you're Hispanic. That must have been so hard for you." And I was like, well, I guess I did it well, because he went through all of college not knowing I was Hispanic. But it was interesting to me, and again, to then step back on this campus and see what's happened. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way that Vanderbilt has evolved. I mean, even when I was here, it was starting. I mean, even though it wasn't happening, I was here when the anthropology department broke away from the sociology department and had its own focus. And that focus, because of the professors that were there and the professors that they ended up hiring, which included Ted Fisher, were all working in Central and mostly Central America, some in South America. But there was a bigger focus into Latin America. And at the time, it was really funny. I remember hearing all these, I would think, grown-up conversations that I didn't understand. And then at one point in my career, I was a college administrator. I sometimes go back now and rethink of those conversations, which was things like the people that were doing these things were saying, what other places on campus are really going to help us? Because we're like this brand new fledgling department, like Latin American studies. We're going to have to go hit them up, We're going to have to figure out how to leverage those things. And it was good, I think, probably for both departments to have these relationships. So that was really an interesting focus on that. But one more question I think we probably can all speak on. Let me just get that back up there. Which is, now I'm having the technical difficulties. So I guess we were talking about, the importance of identity and culture now. I mean, again, going back to the big elephant in the room, what does that really mean? And like I said, I was a little bit nervous when these Hispanic families were asking me what it was going to be like to send their kids. And part of me was like, good God, you people live in Texas. Like, I live in Texas. I know what that's like. It's not going to be any worse in Tennessee. But I was very happy that I was able to tell them that I think that because of the community here, they're going to be okay. I don't know, again, politically, structurally, any of the other things, but the change and the fact that Vanderbilt has, whether it's been kicking and screaming or organically, had changed the demographics of this place, makes a huge difference. And so, again, I think when someone was saying earlier, when funding, not funding, it is the people here. I mean, the thing that's going to, I think, get us out of, or at least make it sustainable, right, is the kind of the perseverance of research and knowledge, because literally we need to keep educating people so they can understand what's happening to them. I think one of the biggest things that was a giant thing for me, which I think you'd said earlier, like when you went to Brazil and there was all these things that were happening and you couldn't contextualize them. I had fortunate experience, fortunate, unfortunate, of being taken to Guatemala in the middle of a civil war, and then also thrust into El Salvador with some really bad things happening, and I had no I was like a kid from the suburbs in Dallas, like what the heck is this that's going on? And but it taught me about, how fragile governments are, how fragile things are. But what I did see from like a lot of the students that we worked with who were like still in universities in Guatemala and El Salvador was they still had this passion and this drive to understand their histories and to educate people in the midst of everything falling apart around them, in the midst of people going missing around them. They were brave enough to show up to school, because sometimes you could show up to school and then be gone, because you could be a student activist in Guatemala or El Salvador and be picked up and disappeared. But to me, I mean, I didn't really understand all of that and what that meant. But unfortunately, for good or for bad, that's things that we're all going to have to start doing now. So what do you guys feel about, about the role cultural identity plays and how, it's been impacted by, your background in being here and learning?
That's a difficult question. I was thinking about what everybody's saying, and to think about myself, when I came here with 22, I turned 23 here, and I found that I was a black girl from Bahia, in Salvador, a city with most of the population are black. And I didn't have a background, really political. Obviously, resistance is there, but there was not talk in my family about political issues. And when I was here, first of all, it was great to be Brazilian. Everybody would know about Brasilia. We are young. Questions normally were around, like Snoop Dogg had he filmed in Brazil, so people were like, Brazil looks like the Snoop Dogg film, or Giselle was a thing, and everybody like, there's a lot of girls like Giselle in Brazil, and it's a supermodel, how people call. But there was also really interest in Brazil and how we came from Brazil, and three girls from Bahia, and we looked really different for each other. So people sometimes found out that Brazil has a big diversity, and people never said like, you are Brazilian. Mm-hmm. Look at me and said, you look like Jamaican, you look like Caribbean, being of Caribbean. And when I speak it, everybody knew that I was from some place out there. So yeah, I think for me to understand what was happening here, when I arrived, Katrina had happened like not 2 years yet. There was some of students from Louisiana here, and some of them were immigrants. So I learned a lot, and I learned about how to be political in a political sense of seeing people and be seen by them. When I was listening to all the talks, I remember Maricel was a student from Louisiana. She was here, and she finished college here. And one day she said, like, you should get a natural cut. You should go natural. I was with braids, and I take off, and she did the natural hair in me. Oh, she cut my hair. I don't know if the word. But this kind of care to look at you and see you and insert you in this kind of care, it was something that I learned here, and how to connect. I said before, we are in the next year in the international hall. We really couldn't relate with Spanish speaking people because we spoke Portuguese, but also we learned a lot. I learned a little Spanish, but I learned a lot of Latin America here. So yeah, there is a sense of identity that is built and make a difference in a place, but also to learn about other people and learn about other people, and many times understanding that there's a lot of similarities is something empowering. And I was never like I was before. When I went back to Brazil, and the many times I came back here, it was understand that I was part of something, and this something is really strong, and it was my first experience here. So I don't know if I answered the question,
no.
but it's a hard question, and just to finish, university in Brazil changed a lot in these years since I was here, when I got to the university, when I went to the university, and now that I am a professor. Politics in Brazil changed a lot. I said that it was a good thing to be Brazilian here in 2006. And it was like the second term of Lula as president. And after that, many things happened. Bolsonaro happened. And for sometimes, there was not hope for us, at least as a sense of no hope. But I think the sense of a strong connection between us in Brazil, and also the strong connection that we have in solidarity with many places of the world, in Vanderbilt, for me, is one of these places, are important to pass these times of fear.
Right.
So yeah, we learn.
Yeah, it's great.
So I won't, repeat myself too much on what I said earlier, about just kind of exposure to, a part of the world I hadn't learned all that much about and whatnot. But I do want to talk about a couple of the opportunities that I got through the center, and how they did shape me and shape my understanding of identity and of, fitting in and whatnot. And so, I grew up kind of in small town Ohio, not a particularly diverse place. And, my family did live abroad some while I was growing up, so we lived abroad for short amounts of time in Europe and in France and in Spain. And so, I had in some ways a kind of international childhood, and then in other ways, while we were back in Ohio, very much not. But there were never really places where, I felt like I stood out too much, or I felt like I didn't quite fit in. And, part of my time with the center was getting a lot of opportunities to kind of study abroad and fully immerse myself in worlds that I didn't fully fit into, or kind of felt a little weird in, or like I stood out in. And experiences that at times could be a little uncomfortable, but I think I grew a lot from and gained a lot of understanding from. So, the center supported me doing research in Bolivia for one summer, and I worked in Cochabamba for a summer. And that was a really powerful experience, both in, kind of not feeling quite right in that, I wasn't fluent in Spanish, and so it was sort of a difficult experience in that way. And that I also kind of very much stood out as foreign and like I wasn't from there, and, and I had a similar experience to that in some ways, just this past year, you know, thinking about where like these majors and these experiences take us, you know, I spent this past year on Fulbright in Brazil, kind of up in northeastern Brazil. And even though I arrived there and I already spoke Portuguese pretty well, it was very clear that like I wasn't from there, just from my accent, just from how I carried myself, how I looked, everything. And I think it's, you know, it's good, especially as someone who sort of grew up in an area where they always kind of fit, to have those experiences where you don't, and to understand that. And yeah, that was something that I think I grew a lot from. And those were experiences that the center gave me and supported me. And I think, you know, pursuing this major and also just going to school in an environment where people are pushed to kind of, you know, go outside of like the boundaries they grow up in, and to seek out new experiences and go to new places and push themselves a little bit. I think that helped open those opportunities for me and pushed me towards trying them, and, you know, allowed me to understand a lot more about myself, understand a lot more about the world. And yeah, I don't know. I think that was a great experience, and something that I really appreciate, my kind of undergraduate experience pushing me towards and leading me to.
I feel like you just stole everything I had to say. But it's fantastic. I mean, I very much feel the same way for me as well. I mean, you know, I'm not Latinx, so it's, you know, I come to this very differently than others, but it shaped my views, not necessarily of myself, but maybe of myself, but how I view the world. And it's not just the Latin American community, but the, you know, for me, I mean, I come to, you know, it's impacted me on how I view the world. I'm a very sort of global mindset person. Some of that was, you know, reinforced with me when I went to work for GE, and so GE's got me going all around the world. And, you know, even this last week, I mean, one of the, you know, I was in India, I was in Thailand, you know, several months ago I was in Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo. And so it's shaped, I mean, I guess if I think about my own identity, it helps me think about, like, I'm a pretty small part of, you know, what is a big world. And so I think of myself that way, you know, and I look at the world in a big way. And it's good. So that's very much started off here at Vanderbilt, shaped and pushed me in that direction.
I think I mean, I kind of went over a little bit about the identity factor too when I initially shared, but I think it further expanded the idea that I didn't have to be just one thing. I'm not sure what thing is, but just like one entity, by virtue of, like, that would be impossible by virtue of where I was born and then where I grew up. And so when I realized that, when I recognized, for those of us that are first gen and, you know, going forward, that flexibility that's required of us to be able to function in different places and all that, and how just how ingrained that was in myself and growing up and helping out my parents, and then it's something that I don't even think about. I feel like it's a quality and a skill that is very hard to teach, but then it also needs to be celebrated when you encounter individuals like that, because it allows you, you're not just like flexible, but you really can sort of morph to be wherever you are. And when I came to Vanderbilt, I had no choice but to really, really look at my culture, to really look at like people that were like me, who were living in their identity, their cultural identity. And so I don't think it would have happened, the sense of like I do feel a sense of pride. I'm so proud of myself for being able to be able to do that, because it also allows me to be very relatable with my patients. I think that's the biggest thing, and to provide that safety that they need when they share vulnerable experiences with me, to gain that trust that they need to follow my plan. You know, it kind of helps with that rapport. And so when I talk with my students, they're like, yeah, you know, they like to downplay a lot of who they are and what they do. And I'm like, no, you really have to like tap into that and really be proud of what you've achieved, be proud of what you've done. And I wish that I had received that more from my own community in a way, where I think a lot of things are expected of us when we grow up, especially when you hear like, you know, we came to this country so that you would have all these opportunities, now go. It's like, okay, I'm going, and I'm achieving, and then you hear like, you gotta do more, you always gotta work harder, you always gotta blah, 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 and then you don't really realize, you don't really have a chance to celebrate that. You really have a chance to really just stop and is like, oh gosh, like I'm from a school that now has like a 4.5 acceptance rate or something, like that's just wild, right? And so it's like, you know, and so I'm more intentional as far as like, this is like what I've done, this is who I am, and making sure that those that I'm mentoring, whether it be my students, my faculty, my patients. I see a lot of patients who have either are refugees, or a lot of them come with their moms and they're translating for their moms. I'm like, girl, I got this. I can talk to your mom. And so they're like, wow, what are, you know, how we kind of get into like the idea of how I got into healthcare, and you know. So I just, I'm thankful that I was able to have my eyes opened through being at Vandy, but also through the offerings of the center, and as far as like the classes, the historical context, like everything. It just burst my heart wide open, burst my mind wide open, and it's only growing from there, so.
Great. I have just a follow-up question for you, since you said that you're now mentoring the nursing. So you feel like the students that are showing up now, do they feel more comfortable in their identity? And
yes. They have the confidence that I never had, and it is astounding to see. But I do much the same with the students or the families that asked you about, like, are we going? Is my kid going to be safe and whatnot? That's a big thing that we get asked a lot. And like I mentioned, in our grad schools, the diversity is not as prevalent as the undergrad. So there is some hesitancy. A lot of our students, like from big states with a lot of Latin presence, like California, New York, like Florida, all those are like, wow, this is so different. I'm like, yes, but here we'll connect here. So yeah, but they're coming in and they're ready to go, which is really great.
I think from my perspective, so like I mentioned, my mom's from Paraguay, my dad's of Armenian descent, so growing up I kind of celebrated both cultures, and that was amazing. And so what I've come to realize is what's really valuable is being in a space that lets you explore that on your own terms and learn about it kind of at your own pace. Explore everything that you come from. And so like culture for me has been sort of what has been taught to me and given to me and what I can learn about, but that already exists. And then my identity is sort of ever evolving. And so for me, it's just being in an environment where I can decide what my identity is and no one else is doing that for me. And so I've definitely experienced that here at Vanderbilt, but I've been in so many different spaces and that's not always the case. A lot of people try to decide what your identity is. Luckily I am strong enough to not let that dictate my life, but it is the reality of the world. And so obviously being at Vanderbilt was really great for me. I was 18 when I got here, obviously had not reflected much on my life. I hadn't lived that much life. I still feel like I have a lot of life to live, so obviously still learning, but here's kind of where it started, where I was kind of like, let me explore this more, let me learn about this, let me learn about that, and so it was just a great pace to sort of feel free to do this on my own terms.
I think my journey through discovering identity and what it means has been one of the biggest parts of my self-development here at Vanderbilt. Like I said before I came to Vanderbilt, I was surrounded by Mexican culture, and I really never put much thought into what identity was or what my identities were. But when I got to Vanderbilt, I started taking courses, Latino and Latino studies courses, and kind of really juggling with this idea of identity. And I think that all those learning experiences were one of the things that kind of helped me start developing like self-confidence and like kind of like align things for me, if that makes sense. Because I came from such a small town, like I often was entering rooms where like I was the only Latino, or like even in research, like we're surrounded by people that really weren't like me. And I think as I started discovering identity, I became more confident in myself, and I think it was one of the most important things that I've developed here, thanks to the CLACX department or in many other departments, like learning what identity was. And I think it's really important to pass that down forward. And now through all of the organizations that I've been a part of, I think that's one of the biggest dialogues that we have, and we try to push down to the underclassmen is like being proud of identity and fostering identity and moving it forward.
Yeah, I think that was, when Salwa, was speaking at the Folklorico, and she was saying, in this time, understanding our identity and understanding who we are is the best form of like being able to cope with everything that's going around, because you have yourself and your community to, because you don't have to let all these outside forces make you doom scroll everything. You have friends, you have identity, you have learning, you have goals and things you want to achieve to go forward. And I think that's the wonderful thing. I like I said, I was an anthropology English major, and then I ended up going to get a degree in Latin American Studies at University of Texas. And I remember it was really funny because for the longest time I just thought, oh, LAS, that's just like that's like a thing. Like, and then I remember going to my first thing, and they're like, okay, here's these 7 to 12 different things. You have to like do 2 of them. And I was like, oh, it's like the whole thing. It's like, so it could be politics, it could be literature, it could be anthropology, it could be all these things, but contextualizing your experience was like the best thing. And I think that's the beautiful thing about what the center has done here when you're talking about the history, it's gone through so many different evolutions of things, but the thing that's wonderful about it is that in each of those evolutions it is like built on things and brought in the Latino experience, brought in different facets of study, and I think that's the thing that's enduring, and that's the thing that will hopefully help it to grow in the future for the next 75 years. Any questions? I think we have some time.
Just an observation, it took 30 years of conscious social engineering to get from your graduating class to you and Henry. Those 2 different experiences.
Yeah, I mean, just having had through Red's life and Leon, and having had that experience somewhat overlap with CLACX, right? Because your first year was CLACX's first year, and that's when we also we're also intentional with the cafecitos, and you and Cesar and your roommate, you guys are a part of these pictures that we took outside there, everybody in mass still, and so it is, and as I need to remind you, but at the end of their first year after the cafe, there was a big old blow up with the Latino students and this and that, and who was representing who and how that was going to look and who was real and who was fake, and I was part of that conversation. Anyway, so it's kind of fascinating to see, the impact that you all have had as a class. I've been here since 2008 as a class, and you just described it. I was part of ALAS, and then the 3 or 4, and those are the only ones you've mentioned so far, different groups that are now into their own 2nd and 3rd year cohorts in and of themselves, right? Something like Master wasn't here 10 years ago.
No,
right? I think that's what's fascinating to see that, right? And to see, and I think from where I'm sitting at, in Red's life, I think that's beautiful and it's powerful and vibrant and whatnot. Our challenge also from the classroom perspective is how do we try to connect those dots, right? And you're unique in the sense of neuroscience, MD, PhD, and Latino studies, right? To you, you're walking and chewing gum at the same time, and that's, but that's something that we're just trying to think through and aspiring to, right? In terms of how do we build off of that? in ways that are also more visible and legible to the College of Arts and Sciences, for example, right? Because I think in the res life world, man, like it's you know, and then this demographic cliff that everybody's talked about in higher ed, and you know what's around the corner. I mean, you know, Latinos are going to outpace every other group by at least 10%, right? I mean, like this is only growing, like, and so like that's just something to think about structurally, not you know at my place or your place in LA or in Nashville. Structurally, nationally, we're talking about almost 25% of the undergraduate population now, right? That changes. I think it has to change the way you think, and not just Latino studies, Latin American studies, English and chemistry and biology and engineering, like that it's a different outlook altogether. I think that it's important for us to factor in and, you know, and to be a part of that, right? 'Cause that's not going back, so it's interesting to, thank you all so much. I mean, and you all have put so much of these questions that we have, and then the perspectives that gained and the different moments, and yeah, no, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming in from, you know, from so far away, from Brazil, from Birmingham, from Vanderbilt, from the Northeast. You know, thank you so much. Like, this has been great. Yeah.